The hardest part about your Bitcoin journey isn't learning how it works. It's unlearning everything that you were taught about how the world functions. Jeff Booth is back on Bitcoin for Millennials, and we discuss the prisoner's dilemma of modern money, why we've never actually lived in a free market, and how the current debt-based money system forces everyone, even the winners, into a game of voluntary serfdom. Jeff reveals why the system's attempts to control money are mathematically doomed, and why the truth of the Bitcoin protocol is the only asset that cannot be captured. This episode is the big picture reality check that I think a lot of people need right now. Don't forget that you are playing a crucial role in the biggest transition of our lifetimes. All right, let's dive in. All right, Jeff Booth, welcome back to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Great to see you, buddy.
Yeah, we have about an hour, so let's see how far we get. I put on X. I was talking to you, and a lot of people send me questions. So I have quite a few, but I wanted to start with. I don't want to say a bone to pick with you, but I really wonder if we can get to some sort of consensus on the topic of medium of exchange and store value. So, as you know, I love your philosophy. You've taught me a huge amount along the way, but there's one thing that I really disagree with you on, which is you say that Bitcoin will fail if it doesn't become a medium of exchange. But wouldn't you agree that before it can be that, it should be abundantly clear that it is the best store of value, right? That the hardest money to ever exist. Like, it isn't cash or any stable coin or any whatever any other person accepts as a reward in a value exchange. Way better to discard of than the best store of value to ever exist. If Bitcoin is kind of like this measurement for value, the ruler, and we measure everything in Bitcoin, does it really matter what people exchange value in eventually if the underpinning is Bitcoin? I hope that makes sense. I just there's a sequence in getting there where you think we should go.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that, and I can tell you why, and I just tell you why the risks of what you just described would be the risks. So from that viewpoint of it's a store of value first. Right, we've always had stores of value. Why do you need a store of value underneath the monetary system? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, I would say it's a function of something that I don't want to spend today. So
let me poke on that. You've needed a store of value because you couldn't store your value in money because money's always been broken. Mm-hmm. So what gives the financial system a belief that it won't be centralized and work, and that's what's happened to gold, is a store of value is everybody thinks that it's underneath the monetary system, and then you have a broken monetary system that is the opposite of the free market that has to concentrate faster and faster. And that monetary system that's centralizing and it's still theft on top of that system. Because and it's faster and faster theft, and then it has to break the rules of the centralization, right?
Yeah.
So it has to change gold, the rules. It has to confiscate or attack another country to take it to maintain its advantage. And so that's the world that we've always known. And that's why people think things turn into a store of value first and then a monetary system, because we've never known something that was a protocol, that was a network, that was both at the same time.
Yeah.
We've never, so I understand why you would believe that. And I understand. But now ask, if everybody did that and it had to be a store of value first, what would be the implications of those actions? It was centralized, right? What would be the implications of the centralized actions? Then all of the governments would all the rails to it. And then what would they do? Now, remember, we're not dealing with any type of technology we've ever dealt with. We're talking about a surveillance state with AI and surveillance state and capabilities that you can't even imagine how fast it's centralizing. When you look at Palantir, when you look at Pegasus and everything they're already monitoring everything you're doing, right?
Yeah.
you can be shut off on YouTube tomorrow. Your voice can be drowned inside this surveillance state. X, all of this thing. And there's right now almost a fight between the bankers and the technocrats, and the technocrats own the means of production today. Mm-hmm. And people are taking sides within that, believing that they're safe, their new god, which is centralizing faster. Right. And they're using all of the same rails into that. So now if you just keep on asking that question, what would it look like if you had surveillance capabilities over the entire population? They were, even if they were in self-custody, mm-hmm. but you were still operating in the other system. Do you think Bitcoin could, because what would happen after that is you would launch an attack, you'd launch a chain split that you can only use my Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that chain split would be really dangerous for the people that were the small number of people and the people that weren't using it as a medium of exchange, and there was no privacy in it and such. It would now the nodes, people running nodes, and you'd only have to, I'm just going through kind of what you would expect to see, even though some of those are dark things. What you'd expect to see is put a couple people in jail, kill a couple of people, say that there's have an event so bad that this group over here created a false flag, and drive people into saying you can only use US coin.
Yeah.
And I think under that type of attack, most people running Bitcoin right now, especially if they made a whole bunch of money in US coin, wouldn't be Bitcoiners anymore. Mm-hmm.
I totally follow the reasoning, and I also think just by the characteristics of Bitcoin, it is already superior money, right? And you and I could use it as a medium of exchange if you would accept it when I offer it to you, when you deliver value to me, right? So, like conceptually, I'm fully aligned. Why I want to ask the question is that, although I agree with you, getting there is a very, I want to say, social thing, right? You cannot force the adoption of the medium of exchange, and I think it is a rational choice that you spend the money that is losing value, just as the incentive that someone has, and storing value today. I'm talking about today in Bitcoin, until Bitcoin becomes more accepted. And yes, I agree, you can participate in that, right? You can, I can start asking for more Bitcoin, I can start spending. So I understand I can do that, but I wonder if that pace, or how do you think about that pace towards this future that you're describing? How do you think that goes?
It's funny how everybody is wondering is so concerned what other people should do, right? And in this, what you're really saying is, I don't want to store it, I don't want to spend it as a medium of exchange, and that is your right to do. But if people don't, then you won't activate the network as fast. You won't. There has to be people that do it early, and I've made a decision to put my energy into the world that I want to see. And I have no problem spending in Bitcoin and then trying to make more in Bitcoin. I have zero problem with that. I think so when you said the rational thing, the rational actor is making the best interests of their against their beliefs and what they want the world to turn into.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole bunch of rational actors, and then there's also rational actors that will take that and say, instead of accepting a system where I'm losing money, I'm paying 2.5% to 3.5% credit card fees or bank fees to take money that's losing money.
Yeah.
Right. But which is most of the rational actors in the world that you're talking about.
Well, or oblivious, but they're just doing it, right? They're just doing it.
Again, they think they're rational actors.
Yes.
Then there's other people who are going to say, "Fuck it all. I am going to give a discount to people who are using my service that pay in Bitcoin."
Yeah,
and I'm going to make more margin.
Yes.
And so I'm going to win the market by cutting out the middlemen and being peer to peer. And as I do that, and so all of these things are happening at the same time, and there is no one audience. And in some countries, it's not 2.5 to 3.5%. It might be 10 to 12%. Right. In some countries that they don't have banking, that this is a lifeline. And so, and I've said this on many different podcasts in many different ways, but a protocol like this, so always the monopoly does a consistent thing to try to protect a monopoly. We're seeing the monopoly of money trying to stop Bitcoin. Right.
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. OnRamp's multi-institution custody model distributes control access across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 multi-sig quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, just segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while OnRamp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything that OnRamp builds. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now OnRamp is piloting flat, predictable pricing to make best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial products more accessible than ever. Visit onrampbitcoin.com to learn more and sign up with code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. OnRamp, strength in many, simplicity in one.
When you have a protocol or a new technology, it always starts not from the monopoly, who has vested interests inside the monopoly, and you in Europe and me in the US, we're in the top of the monopoly.
Yes.
So we wouldn't see what happens at the people that we're extracting from being at the top of the monopoly, how they might use this and move value from the bottom up. And technology always moves from the furthest way. The people most hurt by a monopoly go first. So why El Salvador went first is totally logical, right? Why other countries are racing. We invested in a company that did 800 million in transactions 2 years ago, 2.2 billion in transactions in Africa, 2.2 billion last year, probably does 7 billion in transactions in Lightning and Bitcoin transactions this year. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But and it makes perfect sense why people in the monopoly would be making different decisions, because they haven't had to make those decisions.
Yeah. Again, I agree with that, and this is also where my question comes from. So it's not necessarily from my own point of view. When I'm looking at other people, and I think I agree with you, in our sphere of the world, their need for understanding that their money is broken, although, a lot of things around them are happening as we can see, because we are, interested or curious or whatever. There's a lot of people that are totally oblivious to monetary debasement. They're pointing all different types of ways, not at the source of this, right? So that is kind of where I'm coming from. Is like, okay, and I don't want to trick you because there's no good answer, right? But like, what is big enough? Like, what is a big enough acceptance when Bitcoin does survive as this medium of exchange? I just think it's really hard to put a number on it. But I do see the same challenges in, okay, how do we convince people to not only first protect their wealth from debasement? That is, I think, step one, that is getting into Bitcoin. And then step two is continuing to use this better money, right, as a medium of exchange, so it does proliferate and more people get in touch with it, etc. And that is how it gets adopted. And so my main thing is more like, okay, if that is why I said the rational thing, right? If your first step is, okay, I got to protect my wealth in Bitcoin, and the thing that I still spend in this transition period is perhaps fiat money or stable coins or, whatever, whoever, Walmart coin, something, right? There is this transition phase, and I'm just curious about the pace of how fast that should go versus the future that you are projecting, because you already see that a lot of centralized forces are paying attention to Bitcoin or are trying to choke it, right? Like in the EU, there's also already a lot of regulation where, people have to register, KYC, AML, all these things. So there is a notion of a certain threat, I would say, although they're not calling it that, but they're doing a lot of things to kind of narrow, I would say, the group of people that would adopt and use it. So I'm just wondering about this timeline, because again, I agree with you, but I also think that you cannot force the medium of exchange use on people. That is a very individual decision.
So if you have I see people starting from medium of exchange before store of value.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I've been to many circular economies around the world where it starts at medium of exchange instead of your perception as it starts at.
Exactly. Yeah.
And many other people in first world countries start at store of value. So it's a very unique thing to you that you're ascribing to. It has to look like that for everyone.
Yes. Okay.
So and it doesn't. It people should use this how they determine to use it in their best interest and what they think the world looks like. When I think about our own agency in this, each of our own agency, which we've always given to somebody else. If you're operating in the fiat system, if you're spending all your time and energy in the fiat system and yelling at the same fiat system, who's to blame?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. We've talked about this before, but I think it's just interesting.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. And I don't, again, people don't have to agree, they disagree. I love the disagreement, right, from this. But what makes me so positive that this is going to work and stay decentralized and secure and impose its building and layers and everything else and do exactly what I suspect is I'm in that environment every day.
Yeah.
I'm talking to those people every day. I'm talking to the builders who are never going back, who are building this. I'm going into the circular economies. I'm watching what's changing. I'm watching the people move from fear to hope. Thousands of them, right? Who are adding their voice to this network and spending more time in building into to this network. And I'm also watching people who never knew this unlock and move exactly what you just described. Pieces, sometimes store value first, then I want to learn a little bit more. How do I move more time into it? I'm watching the entire thing. But what would it feel like if there's, call it 10,000 people over here and 8 billion people over here with all the misunderstandings of everything else about what Bitcoin is, that it's a protocol, that it's emerging in layers? What would the world look like in the noise of the world today? It would look exactly like this. It would be really confusing because most of the people were, and every single person, whether you were in like the thing I was talking about, Peter, with your version of the world, mm-hmm. You would think you knew better than everybody else, and those other people were crazy. And
for sure.
And so it again, the change is not Bitcoin. The change is us.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm seeing these comments on X every day. You don't see them anymore, but yes, from a lot of other people's point of view, you know, we are obviously the crazy ones and part of the Ponzi and all these things, right? This is how they judge it, and I think we've talked about this extensively. So I want to thank you for the reflection. I will think about it, but I think it's interesting to kind of tie it back, and I also want to double click on a thread. Bitcoin is very big, I would say, right? This is kind of what I take from this back and forth. It's like it is so paradigm shifting. This is also something we've talked about before, and it is my individual experience is different from yours, and your actions are different from mine, and so on and so on, and all these other people, right? But there's a North Star. We're moving towards something, and everyone is at a different level of action, interest, and knowledge, I would say. But it's more about the moving, I would say, yeah. Right? And yeah.
Because of the consensus mechanism and what this looks like, there's a North Star for you. And that North Star might be different for somebody else who's trying to create an empire inside. Like, let's just say if you wanted to create a new financial system, that you were the king of the financial system and it was still a broken financial system, You might see Bitcoin as a store of value, and I'm going to collect as much as possible, and I'm going to keep this exact same rails of a broken monetary system based on extraction. And if you were talking like that, you would polarize an audience, completely polarize an audience. You could say you're both Bitcoiners, and the people that looked from outside to Bitcoiners, they would wonder, what the hell is these crazy fights, right? Mm-hmm. Because they were looking at it from two different frameworks. Yes. One is as an asset, like you just described it, and one is a protocol that changes the world. And both those frameworks produced completely different forward views. And so I don't judge anybody by their actions and whatever things. I also expect that if we've never lived in a global free market, then we also have to accept that we are part of the problem through getting co-opted, right? Yes. And most people will get co-opted because they'll tell them some story. I need to do enough for my family, right? And I'll take the short-term win to get co-opted. The financial system wouldn't look like it does if that wasn't true. We wouldn't go into these endless wars. We wouldn't go into all this. We wouldn't see Jeffrey Epstein and all of what that means, and then still operate in that same money, thinking that we could have a different result. But we do. Meaning that all of that power that's accruing more and more from our actions inside that system, that's centralizing more and more, that we keep on telling ourselves it's not us, it's them.
Yes.
There's always an external validator to say it can't be us, but it is us. It always has been us. Yeah. And so that's why this is such a deep conversation. It therefore has to be a deep conversation. If it's the first time in history,
yes,
we could actually have a protocol that essentially enshrined rules of the best of us into something that was best for us that couldn't be cheated. But you would have to expect the entire path along that way, it will try to be cheated. And many people that are saying today that they're Bitcoiners won't make the journey.
I think this is exactly why I just said, this is why Bitcoin is so big. It's so big because it goes so deep, right? I mean, I just saw a picture of Howard Lutnick with Jeffrey Epstein on his island, right? And Lutnick loves Bitcoin, and therefore other people like Lutnick or whatever, right? And I think this is what you're partially also alluding to with what you're saying, right? This is why this is so difficult and so big. And something I wanted to zoom in on is, I think you and I fully agree Bitcoin is a parallel system that embodies certain characteristics, right? Like the forced transparency, for example, hard cap supplies, that are totally opposite of fiat money. Right, and we think that is a good thing. It services the obvious and very fundamental flaws of fiat money. Right, as long as Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, as you say. Right, as long as it stays like that, it will just keep on chugging along. Will be doing what it's doing. Right, and therefore it will show its characteristics as this mirror. You can call it the light versus the dark or whatever. Right, and that is why more and more people will make the individual decision, okay, this is a better money. But wouldn't you agree that no government, would ever give up the control they have now over issuing a currency, right? Like, however that helps them. So in the US, you can kind of see this free market of monies, taking shape. Like I said, you're going to have Walmart coin and whatever coin, and all these coins have to buy US Treasury. So even though they let the currency kind of free, perhaps, it all ties back to the debt of the country, which they cannot really magically make disappear. Maybe they inflate it away into Bitcoin, whatever. But I think what you're now saying is we shouldn't be really sure if that is a good thing, right? That is how they might see
it's a terrible
using Bitcoin for their goals.
So of course it's going to happen. because it extends their goals. It sends a reign of monopoly power. Of course, it's going to happen, and it's not a good thing for the decent, because if it happened and you didn't do the counter to be able to make it a protocol spend in private, then it would centralize and Bitcoin would break. And when that inevitable chain split comes, then you'd likely be on the wrong side of that because of that. Now that's not going to happen. It's going to be tried. It's going to feel so chaotic because most of the energy of the world is there, and most of those people that are thinking in Bitcoin in the piece of paper will side with the piece of paper because they're looking at it as a store of value. They're not looking at a store of value in Bitcoin. They're looking at a store of value against a piece of paper.
Yes.
And you can see so right now, the hands in the air and everything else about the price and everything else. You have a network expansion that is exploding. I was in a network expansion that was exploding in the early internet. I built a company there, and in 1999 to 2000, everything collapsed. Amazon, I think, went from $128 down to $3. Everything collapsed. Our company just barely survived through this. But when you looked at the internet and the traffic and the people building things and what was happening, it was like straight up to the right. And then you had a pricing event that collapsed and everybody got flushed out. Nothing changed.
No,
nothing changed. No. You had a protocol network and a network effect that was exploding, and nothing changed. And today you have the exact same thing in Bitcoin. Oh, the price, and because they're all measuring it from a piece of paper, that is the thing that is giving the centralized control more structure, more power. Mm-hmm. So obviously that's a really hard concept for people to understand. It feels really easy to me because I've been saying it for so long. But when I watch people make decisions on this network, they're constantly making decisions from trying to compare the old to the new. And like you said, they're 180. They're totally different. The operating principles of everything change everything. So you have to start from the new and what that poses if it stays decentralized and secure, and then you have to say, what are the risks? Because if everybody's in this other system and it gains its power from everybody,
yes,
then you have to think about what the risks through that lens look like on this new protocol. And then you have to ask an honest question: can it resolve? Can it stay decentralized and secure against those risks? And come to a conclusion why or why not.
All right, I'm gonna stay on this thread because one of the things I wrote down was something you just mentioned. You know, this there's a thread I think some people see, and I think you just alluded to it too, right? That you could see a chain split, a fork by institutions. You know, in the beginning of the BlackRock ETF, there was this legal disclaimer that went kind of viral, which I think it is just a legal disclaimer, but on the other side, it also opens up what you just talked about, right? I think it said something like, in the event of a chain split, we decide which one to go with, and that is what the IBIT thing is. The ETF is going to do. They have a certain leverage because they can choose theirs over the Bitcoin one, right? By dumping the old and switching it for the new, etc. So, do you view this as a legitimate threat? Is this going to happen, or is this just something that also exists?
So,
how do you judge it?
So, and this is why I'm trying to get people to claim their own agency. This is really what I'm trying to do in virtually every podcast as people understand it more, right? I'm trying to get them to claim their own agency. And if you're pricing it from a piece of paper and if you're holding it on one of those exchanges, you haven't claimed your own agency. Mm-hmm. You're still inside the other system. And you're probably talking about the fear. What about this? What about this all day long? Well, you're giving that, amplifying the ability for it to create that fear. That system lives on your fear. It lives on the next chaotic event to be able to create the fear, to be able to create the control system that you live in. You don't know it because you're measuring it from that.
For my European friends that want to buy Bitcoin with ease, check out Relay. I've been a longtime fan and happy to partner up with what I think is the best Bitcoin-only platform for Europeans. They offer a super simple, beginner-friendly app with no distractions and no shitcoins. You can do a quick one-time smash buy or set up automatic purchases when you're stacking regularly. And here's the thing that matters most. Relay is 100% self-custody. Every set you hold is yours. Your keys, your coins. If you want to get started, download the app via my link below or in the description and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, at checkout to get 10% off your fees. A huge shout out to Relay for sponsoring the show. Now let's continue. I think you are the perfect person to unpack further again why this is so big. Right, because our whole entire lives is the creation of a paradigm in this, right? Like I have my entire life to thank for fiat money up until I got to Bitcoin, right? I mean, like that is in the country that I grew up in, it just worked, right? So I don't have any real urge to figure out that the money is broken or that there are all these perverse incentives at the top, right? But from my position, right?
And then we have to realize that because you were closer to the top of the monopoly than somebody in the Democratic Republic of Congo, somewhere else, you don't realize that you extracted from them.
Oh, and I do, but yes.
But again, so what's happening today is there's an honest protocol that says that shall not cheat.
Yes.
And every single person on the planet can move to their energy to that protocol. That does not cheat. And as they understand what their life looks like, as they move more time and energy onto that protocol expands. That is the network expansion.
Yes.
It's also the layers that are being built on top to provide the risk. And the vast majority of the world has no idea that they can move their time and energy over to this. So they're stuck in this operating framework that you described. Many Bitcoiners stuck in that and they're just measuring this asset through the piece of paper and getting scared out when it price and they liquidate out when it falls because they're scared. It's going to happen over and over and over again as we change and realize that the world is created from the sum of our actions. It just doesn't happen to us. We have a say. And when you have agency and a say, and you see a whole bunch of other people adding their agency and a say to be able to create that, you're not scared of any of this nonsense anymore.
Yeah.
But there will be chain splits. You might be on the wrong side of that chain split. Yeah, many people will be, right? Because they'll be scared of that, and they will, just like Bcash, they'll go to zero.
Yeah,
right? There will be.
Yes. So again, this is why I love this. But there's this. I think what is difficult is to connect the technical parts and the profound implication of having a open source protocol that conceptually no one can kill, right? The protocol for perfect money is out there and it can live on forever, even in a dark corner of the internet with 10 people, right? And that is fact. And I think what you are saying is, okay, what you need to do, I think that the jump or the translation is to, okay, if you can understand what the implications are of this profound conceptual technical thing, you should act on it, right? I sometimes tweet is like, we're memeing it into existence. That's what we're doing, right? We're manifesting it together literally because we are putting our energy and attention, actions toward it, etc. But there's this it's a dual understanding of you need to understand to a certain degree what the technological discovery is, but also what the moral implications are when you proliferate it into the world. Because if you can kind of visualize that destination, it gives you energy and motivation and an incentive to do certain things today. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I would give that back to you. Yeah. Well, then the knots and core, I have not, well, from time to time, I've been in this discussion, but I think to an extent on what we're talking about right now, I think it's actually a very good bridge to touch upon that. I had a lot of people on X talking about this. The question is more about how through this lens that you're describing, can you view this, the actions of core, V30, increasing upper turn limit, etc. There's a counterforce, knots, BIP 110. People talk about, this Epstein thing he funded through the MIT Media Lab, people working on it, etc. So, stuff is happening. People have different opinions of what they should do. They have different motivations. I think it's very hard to really understand personal motivations of people, whatever, at least from my point of view, as I'm following this with interest. But how do you think just through this? There's different ideologies on one side and like moral implications, and there is like different technical implications. So I think that's a good bridge to what we're talking about.
Okay, I'm going to start, because these are so charged conversations, I'm gonna start at a higher level, and I'll break it down to this conversation, because this is going to happen time and time again, right? And they're all going to be charged.
I agree.
And they're all going to be charged.
Yeah.
And they're going to be charged because people have a different belief in their own way of action of what Bitcoin is, right? So let me start with it. If you understand game theory and iterative game, prisoner's dilemma and iterative game theory, and you understand the best rational choice of what you can make in that game, and all game theory is really how we act, right? What is the best interest of us, and how do we act under different scenarios? So if you add payoff matrices to game theory, and one payoff matrix, you won't get caught. And then another one, I'm going to keep on increasing the reward. I'm going to start at $10, $100, $1,000, $1 million, $10 billion, $100 billion. I'm going to keep going higher and higher and higher. What you find is I've seen as low as 2.5% of people will not take the money. But that, by the way, what I just described shows why money's always been broken. Because 97.5% of people will say, I won't. And by the way, if you watch Mr. Beast, or if you watch Survivor, these shows are built on that. And why they're so compelling is because we're watching and asking ourselves, could we? Right? And what you see is the 97.5% of people always take the money. And you see, and you see it over and over and over again, and then the 2.5%, and then you celebrate. Wow, that person was so great, but they walked away with zero, and you forget about them, right?
Yeah. Sidestep. Do you know the percentage of people that are INTJ?
Yeah, no, it's around the same.
That's 2.5. Yeah, exactly.
I know. So which might be a different version of what we're talking about, but. What the 2.5% of people, and this has been consistent throughout history, I think, because that's how we're wired. What they're saying is I couldn't live with myself if I did that, right? And what most people are saying is I need to do this before somebody else does it to me for my family.
Yes,
right. They're not bad people. They're not everything else. So if that's been the entire history, and by the way, you could actually probably tie this into, you might be able to tie this into religions, you might be able to tie it into everything else, or any significant leader that was killed. What would it look like if you were the lone wolf that was so dangerous to the system? And then what would it look like to those people as we celebrated in them the thing we couldn't hold in ourselves? Right. What would the observer effect from the person who was standing out there? It would be really dangerous for a control system because they were above it. But it would be lonely, and they would most likely be killed over time from the control system. So what Bitcoin gives us is, and through the consensus mechanism and what this is, those 2.5% of people typically aggregate, and they run nodes, cypherpunks, they run, and anonymity, right? And so you don't have to poke your head up and everything else, but as there's thousands of these people, that is the backbone that protects Bitcoin. And now it gives the 97.5% of people who aren't just bad people. Some probably 2.5% on the other might be, right? But the 97.5%, they just don't have just given a choice if somebody's going to cheat them or they're going to get cheated. They'll cheat somebody before they get cheated. Mm-hmm. But now they can cooperate on an honest chain. And so it moves the entire world in the direction of what we're talking about, and more people can see themselves in it. Okay, so now with that as a frame. So my expectation, and
zero sum versus what I got from you, the cooperative competitive.
Yeah, exactly. An infinite game, zero sum game to an infinite game.
Yes. Okay.
And once you see yourself in the infinite game, if you truly see yourself in the infinite game, then you know yourself, you know you're never going to go to the zero sum game. But each person has to ask that for themselves. And what my expectation is 97.5% of people that I know today. So people think I'm an optimist, right, or a utopian. I'm just looking at the data and all of these things, and I know how big the challenge is. But I also know that if there's 2.5% of people that'll do this, that's a huge number of people that aren't going back. And that'll swing in favor of more and more people. So now that's kind of the highest level. So my expectation is most people will cheat. My expectation is when they say don't slay your heroes or slay your heroes is because most people will cheat. Right? That's the meme. That's the meme saying what I just said. So now underneath that, if you had one instance core and you had a world that looked like that, you could expect that group of people to be, whether they knew they were being co-opted or whether they're being co-opted, you could expect over time, and I'm not saying they were or weren't, right? I'm saying you would have to have an expectation if the entire political establishment looks like this, and through money and power and everything else, and you had a group of people with power, a narrow group of people with power, and that narrow group of people was a risk to this entire power structure, you would have to expect that those people would be attacked. And when I say attacked, I wouldn't
approached.
You wouldn't do it in a way that they would know they were being attacked. You would do it in a friendly way. You would do it in these things are needed and everything else. And so, but the consensus mechanism, and I'm sorry, I'm going in kind of layers because it's such a deep topic. But so the consensus mechanism and what it means to me is I get to see everything. We've always lived in a world where we lived in this small box. The crazies were either killed or made to look crazy, and we couldn't see their ideas even if they were genius, because we lived in this small box. And the consensus mechanism breaks that box wide open, that we all get to see the entire thing. We get to see the person who could be a genius over here, right? And 99% of the time they're genius, and 1% of the time they do something that does massive harm. And we can see the person over here that is exactly the same, right? And we get to decide what Bitcoin means for us. And so given all of this and what I would expect the world to look like, and I want to say, I really like a bunch of people in core. I like Giacomo. I like a bunch of the people on Odell. Many of the people, and as I say these names, I know I'm going to get attacked. right, from the other side. And then I love other people, Mechanic, Luke, because I'm looking at the idea, not the person, constantly. And the debate, and as people fight more and more, I want to dig in more. And anytime there's an ad hominem attack, I think that's my clue to look deeper, because most people can't look deeper, right? Because they're so caught up in their in-group bias, out-group bias, I'm better, that person's bad, that they can't see the genius on both sides. And so how do I do this? I run knots today. I run knots because I thought what Core did on version 30 was dangerous. And when I looked at the when I looked at that, and it was, and I suspect that as you're a group of people and people are attacking you and saying this is danger, then it's easier to create an echo chamber of other people that are your friends and everything else to stop listening. I'm not saying it would be a really hard job to do this, because you're constantly under attack, but you have and the human condition is you want to talk to people who like you instead of people who don't like you. And so that would create this essentially narrow groupthink that expelled people like Luke. And when I look at some of the stuff that Luke Dasher has done, he's brilliant. Right. When I look at some of the stuff that he's done, and so I made a decision for myself to run knots. Now the risk of knots is there enough maintainers? Does it grow? Does it? And then what if there's just a new version of a risk that then consolidates power and under a control. So that is a very real risk that you have to understand as well. But knowing all of these things, I made a choice to run knots. I have not made a choice yet to run BIP 110, but I understand the both sides of the issue. And part of the reason I haven't made a choice yet, and everybody wants me to, is I understand the risks to that choice too. And when I do, and I don't want people to do things because I did them. Because I want them to do them because they've done the work themselves to decide what that looks like. But when I look at all of these people and the fights on either side, then it actually helps me get smarter on these issues. So I'm thankful for all of them.
Yeah, I think a few thoughts here. There's a few things. I always say, the fact that people were paying attention to people like Epstein and surroundings in 2011 to Bitcoin, right? Or just in general, Gavin Andreessen went to this CIA presentation that he later wrote about on the forums, where he said like they all thought I was a weird guy or whatever, right? Like the fact that people in those realms were already paying attention to Bitcoin, for me, is actually a very positive thing, right? I mean, how many random ideas are released on the internet every day, let alone on obscure cypherpunk internet forums, right? Why would you even pay attention to that? And it's still alive and growing today, right? So for me, that is a signal that this is something special and something big. Something that takes a long time, and that everyone, like you said, will look at the profoundness, importance of it in their own way, and they will fight or contribute to that in their own way. But the beauty in the technical sense is that well, I would say, there's a beauty and there's a challenge, because it is so absolutely transparent, right? You can verify everything for yourself, and therefore I would say you should, to make a decision as to how you adopt Bitcoin. And it goes back, I think, to the beginning of this conversation as well, right? The fun or the interesting thing is that with fiat money, you never had a clue, right? You just used the card and it beeped and you got something from a store and you were like, yeah, whatever. Apparently this is money, right? And when you were younger, it was with coins and bills. So you never questioned it, although it makes you a subject in a system, right? Not an actor. So your ignorance is basically used to abuse you, steal your time and energy, and all these things. But again, because Bitcoin is this mirror and it is the total transparent opposite, all this agency is put on you, I would say, right? So you have to do the work. And therefore, I think we also see all these struggles because different kinds of people with different kinds of morals or understanding or IQ, whatever, it doesn't really matter. They all get confronted with that forced transparency and this fighting, this tension, basically.
Yeah. And think about some of the things that a bunch of developers might or might not know because they're good at code. But they might be making the same intuitive mistake by measuring a fiat system into a Bitcoin system that most people make, right? A free market operates different. Yes. So when I watched the debate on some of the stuff that why some of this stuff happened to protect miners' fees, I'm going, this is insane, right? The mining doesn't need fees. The block reward, if measured in Bitcoin, right, is enough to 2140, and what you're seeing is right now, through Lightning, Fediment, and other stuff, it's removing that capacity to be able to so you have an anchor at the bottom. And why I say this is, if you tried to drive fees in mining, if you were a bad actor trying to drive fees on standard. So what would you be doing? You'd be locking in a high-cost data center around high-cost energy, and you'd get wiped out faster by the free market.
Yeah.
Because the mining always is always driving to the new equipment, new compute, and the lowest cost energy. So if you're trying to extend your life on fees to try to extend your life on a data center, you're driving yourself off a cliff faster because you're not driving at the free market to the edge of energy. And so that's what you're seeing right now. And you're seeing this, like, I'm on the board of Core Scientific, and the Bitcoin mining, and they have some of the lowest cost energy in the US. Bitcoin mining doesn't work anymore, right? Because now at the hash rate, it's unprofitable. And so when I watched the debate around what we should do to protect miners, or the centralization of miners, and that's going to be a problem, is because they don't understand how markets work. And the centralization of mining cannot happen in this industry. Yeah. Because it operates on the free market principles.
It's interesting that the thing that Bitcoin philosophically promises to accelerate or fuel, right, this free market, is also the thing that is happening in the journey to getting there, right? Like the proof of work. I wonder what you think. I want to check. Like, proof of work is true on every fractal of Bitcoin, right? Like, from the technical to the philosophical to the whole personal, the spiritual part, whatever, right? And so I think the interesting thing is that if you want to participate in this free market of this idea in general, whether philosophically or, I'm doing a podcast, other people mine, whatever, yeah, you got to do it, right? Like, it's walk your talk, basically. So if you want to do a chain split because you don't agree with XYZ, you should do it because you can, and you should, and you're going to figure out if enough people care, and if not, then not, and if they do, they do, right? And I really like that we went here, because this is the essence. No, this is the essence. Like, if you want to do it, you should. Like, you it's not only talk; you have to do it.
It's, what is Bitcoin to you? right? And why I aligned with Knots is Bitcoin is a protocol to me, and it's coming in layers, and it's money and everything else, and it's not a database. And so I align more with that side. Now I understand why other people would want this. I understand why an entire construct of the way the world works today would want the existing things to be different. And Bitcoin has always resolved against this. Now, whether this works for right now on Bitcoin 10 or not, and I don't want to chain split, right? And but at some point I'm going to be caught to what is Bitcoin for me, right? And I'm going to and whether that's now, whether when it gets centralized more in centralized exchanges and comes after Bitcoin, but at some point these things are going to happen, and we're all going to be called on to make the decision on what that looks like to us, right? And there's probably and because I think because this is such a complicated conversation, and because of the transition, and because and most people are measuring from the other system still, it's going to elicit these crazy responses and fighting for what people believe on both sides.
Yeah, and I almost want to say as we should, if we think about how
that's the beauty about the consensus
important
we get to see it all. Yeah, we get to see it all, and it should be that important to you.
Yeah. But it is not changing the technology of money is not an easy in the world, right? Is not an easy feat, and also not a quick journey. And I think this is I like to talk a lot about the personal journey, spiritual part of this. I think this is where you eventually want to get that you are. This is why some people say Bitcoin is like a religion, right? But you give your you give your attention and your energy to this thing in the future, which maybe will only happen after you die, right? Like and then take a very long time.
And this was why you said before we started, you still get triggered sometimes of everything else. I just realized that this is a personal journey from every single person going through this,
exactly.
And all of the people going through it. If this was going to continue, it has to look like this, and all of this misinformation has to look like this, and all of the different versions of what reality look like have to look like this. And I don't begrudge somebody from what their version is. I can completely, I can respect somebody immensely that has a different idea for what this is, and a different version, and I can still learn from them, even if I might not agree with them on this on what it is to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy you got that insight too. This is also what I think. It's a one-by-one conversion, right? It is. Are you making the choice? And it's on every level, of taking on that absolute agency. That's why I think it is. Some people don't like it, I think, when I say it, but it's partially enlightening. To a degree, where you really say, like, okay, I'm really going to take control. Or attempt to take control with this technology that is given to us. And there's a lot of scary stuff that comes with taking control, right? Taking on that agency versus in a fiat money world, just outsourcing almost everything to other people know better than you. And on a different level of their own, spiritual or personal journey in their lives, right? And so I think it is just, again, this fractal idea of the proof of work is just so interesting. Like, if you say yes on one level, you basically have to go to all these other levels and also say yes, but they might take different times before you personally get there, right?
Yeah. That's what's happening, and this is imposing this across the world, and it's our choice whether to understand and when and how and what it looks like. And you watch. I watch people even with my body of work, right? Mm-hmm. That have seen it 100 times and still not get or fight against me and say, like, the worst things about me. right? How stupid I am, everything else. And then one day click and they get it, right? And it was never about me. It was how they viewed the world, and this thing was too hard to be able to grab onto. And it was about them. And it wasn't about me when they yelled at me. It wasn't about me when they loved me. It was about them. Mm-hmm. And so watching people make this journey into this thing, and the number of people that have, and why I'm so excited and just grateful to be here, right, in this time in the world, is when I know the thousands of people on the front lines of this who are fighting for a better future, and they're not even fighting for a better future. They're building a better future. They're literally, their energy is inside this thing, and more all the time. It's so crazy hopeful. The little fights and everything else that you should expect along the way, if this is going to work, they're nothing burgers to me.
Yeah, I think the word would be striving. We're striving towards something, right? All right.
We're actually building it, right?
Yeah.
It's not happening to us. We're co-creating it.
Yeah. I agree. And that's also what I really like, is like, what is Bitcoin to you? What you said, right? Like, whatever Bitcoin is to you, if there is a certain calling in there where you think like, I want to contribute, you can basically do anything, right? It doesn't really matter what. All right. I know we have to wrap up. I still had a lot of questions from everyone on X, but I think this was the right conversation at the right time for this, because I feel that a lot of people miss the bigger picture within all the noise, basically, right? But and you can extract yourself from the noise. I mean, I know that you did that, but I also think there's still a lot of people that need to hear what this bigger picture is and what it asks from them as well. That it's not an easy feat, that it's going to take a lot of time, that it is the proof of work.
Can I just say and potentially the same thing that happened in core, and potentially thing that happens in all human beings and all societies, and why we gravitate to these small groups and everything else. In group, out group bias. You would likely never belong to the group that you thought was inferior. Right?
Yeah. Funny.
So when you're in group, you think you automatically assume that group is better. You might not come across that way, but that's your natural thing and you're easily exploited and to those other people. Right, when I see the things, when the derangement on both sides of this, and some of it's right, and people fighting for, and they can do it whatever way they want, but that what I see is that in group, out group bias, and people missing the signal. People missing the signal that they can learn from their enemy. They can learn from somebody in a different group. They can still just rationally make decisions and say, even if I didn't agree with somebody 99% of the time, there might be a nugget here to really look. And it just what I wanted to end on that is, it's just who we are as humans, right? And so if everyone else you see falling into the same trap, how do you know that you're not falling into the same trap?
I think that's a great ender. So yeah, thanks so much. I hope people appreciate this and find it valuable. I know I did. So thanks for your time and your insights, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks, Bram.
All right. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode. Bye.